This manhwa lasted 10 years.
But we'll tell it in a few months.
You tell it, and I'll retell it.
No problem.
You don't find such a gripping story anywhere else.
Beautiful artwork.
Interesting and multifaceted characters.
Exciting love line and scenes.
A logical and complete ending, even though it's sad.
Let's get started. There was a fire in a secret laboratory. The scientists who were engaged in secret research barely survived themselves and could not save any of the artifacts and materials of their work. A man in a robe with black eyes watched this fire as a pleasant sight. The next day, at the county courthouse, a woman sat with a girl who had an eye patch. She was very quiet and was watching the news on TV. After a while, her mom, who worked at the court as an attorney, came in. When she saw the news on TV about the fire at the National Archaeological Research Center, which was most likely a terrorist attack, she was overcome with panic. She grabbed her daughter and headed for the exit. About 30 years ago, an ancient sarcophagus was found at a construction site in Seoul, inside of which were found two corpses with no signs of decay, whose clothes and the writing on the box itself did not belong to any ancient era that had ever existed on Earth. Scientists then decided that this was a yet unknown dead civilization. The research went nowhere, and they shut it down, but they actually continued to study everything underground until yesterday when a fire broke out. A woman arrived at her mother's house and threw her daughter into her arms. She began to panic, saying that those people who had something to do with the research would now find the girl, so she needed to be hidden from them until things calmed down. The mother was afraid she couldn't protect her daughter, for she didn't even have a husband, so she left, leaving her to her grandmother. The girl sat on the porch and did not understand. Could she have anything to do with the ancient era? A dark man appeared in front of her and said that if she had not come here by sunset, he himself would have to look for her. The girl cried, longing for her mother, and hugged the man. The era that had no name was named as the Lost Era. 10 years had passed. The girl grew up and started attending high school. Her name was Hai-won. After a boring class, she was chatting with her friends when suddenly one of her teachers called her, informing her that her grandmother had died. She went to her grandmother's house, where her mom was already busily attending to the funeral. While her mother was attending to the guests, the girl approached the incense that had been lit to hold her grandmother's soul. Standing near them to say goodbye to her relative, she thought about the fact that her grandmother was a shaman and seer to whom people came for help. But still, the true future of people she could not see, so she was always worried about her and mom. Suddenly, she felt the gaze of red eyes on her, as if in her subconscious, and she thought she almost fainted. Then Hee-won thought a black silhouette was looking at her among the trees in the garden. And then her mother assumed that her daughter was tired and sent her to sleep in her grandmother's room. But Hae-won did not sleep. She opened her grandmother's dresser and saw in it an unusual dagger. When she picked it up, she cut herself. It was so sharp. In the moonlight, she looked at the unfamiliar writing on the blade, and suddenly a blue light spread across the room, and then a black-haired young man appeared in front of her. He said he was a muha named Yoonwol, and asked her name, addressing her by the title Sunggakja. Yoonwol's voice sounded inside Hae-won's head. She was surprised by his long black hair, blue eyes, and exotic clothes, and she didn't immediately realize that he appeared out of a dagger. Yoonwol asked why she didn't answer him, and then the girl replied that she didn't know what Sunggakja and muha were, or even how he had appeared here. The young man realized that his new mistress had unsealed the dagger by accident and was not in possession of any information. Her powers were not fully awakened yet, and so he only had a translucent aura rather than a fully physical body. Suddenly, he felt the intense gaze of black eyes and realized that the mistress had already found her foes. The shadow was aiming a fiery demonic arrow at them, and Eunwell, covering the girl with his body, figured out the location of the archer, then began to fight him after figuring out his location in the garden. Because of his teleportation, there was an explosion in the room. Hae-won's mom came running to the rumbling sound. She assumed it was because of the exploding pipes, and when she saw her daughter bleeding from her ears, she immediately went to the hospital. Yunwol fought with Shadow, but he soon escaped, and then Muha followed his mistress. Devon woke up in a hospital room, hearing her mother's voice. She told her that a pipe leak had caused the explosion. Yunwol stood beside the woman and mentally informed the girl that the explosion was actually caused by an attack from a mysterious creature. He also asked her not to tell anyone about it, as she was the only one who could see and hear it. K1 then replied to her mom that she didn't remember anything about how the explosion happened. When she went to get the doctor, Yunwol said that whoever had attacked them was a shadow, a dark creature whose energy went against light magic, but for some reason it had escaped during the battle. That wasn't what bothered Mooch, however, but how Haewon had been able to break the seal. To awaken Muka, a spirit chained to an object, required the death of a relative, knowledge of ancient languages, and a fully awakened Sungakja, and Haewon didn't qualify on the last point. He explained that Sungakja are special people who have a divine purpose. They can use the power of the Muk to do whatever deeds their destiny has ordained them to do, and if they do not fulfill their duty, they are reborn as Sungakja again to fulfill their destiny. However, the Mukas themselves also have their own mission, and the Sungakjas must in return help them in the fulfillment of that mission. Watching all this dialogue was a girl with purple hair through the reflection of the water. A white-haired young man approached her and asked her what was the matter. The girl replied that Haewon had finally shown up and had awakened Unwol, who had been sleeping for 500 years. The young man asked the mistress if she would not kill this girl whom she had chased in every incarnation. The lady replied that she would find those who could kill her, for in any case, she would now be hunted. After the hospital and the funeral, Haewon packed her things to go home with her mom. She took her dagger with her, but she wasn't really going to become Sungakja. Yunwol had said that if she didn't recognize herself as his mistress in 7 days, he would go back to sleep, but wouldn't she regret it when she realized her purpose? Wouldn't it be too late? As she walked to her car, a black shadow with red eyes glared at her, wanting to devour her. Chapter Haewon's school uniform was in the wash, and the girl had to run to school in her regular clothes. She was almost late, and when her friends found her, they called her to go to a movie together this weekend. A week went by. Yunwol looked out the window, pondering that the 7th day had already arrived, and when it passed, it would leave young Sungakja. He remembered the blue-eyed brunette from the past, and told himself that he too had a duty to find the celestial maiden who had gone against the will of heaven. The next morning, Haewon went to meet her friends to go to the movies. She was the very first to arrive, and discovered that she had forgotten to put her dagger in her purse. She also remembered that today was the last day before Yunwol disappeared, and though she didn't want to recognize herself as his mistress, she was scared and wistful at the thought that he might be gone forever. Her grandmother came up to her and asked for help to escort her to the park gate. She escorted the old woman, but she suddenly took off her human mask and turned into a creepy shadow that wanted to devour the girl. K1 ran away from the shadow in a panic, but the shadow followed her. It then swung its claws to strike at the girl, but Yunwol came to the rescue and repelled the attack. Even though Haewon didn't have his dagger with him, he was still able to come to the rescue, but he asked her not to call him by his name so he wouldn't get attached to her. He landed a few more blows on the monster, and when he turned around he saw that Haewon had covered her mouth with her hands to hold back a scream. He realized that she was still quite young to have seen such horrors and decided to move her to another place and then go back and finish off the shadow. They teleported to the place where Haewon was supposed to meet her friends. Yunwol said that he was now fully manifested in a physical incarnation due to the fact that he was siphoning power from Haewon for her own protection. Flies could gain a physical body through their host's energy when their lives were in danger. After that, he headed back to the shadows and gave one last smile to the girl as she asked him to be more careful. Right now, It was most important to keep her vitality until the very end and not lose consciousness, because if she fainted, then Yunvol would also lose her physical abilities and wouldn't be able to finish off the shadow. Suddenly, Haewon saw the girl calling Unvol her brother and saying that she hated him and herself for daring to be angry with him, since he had not kept his promises. He was much younger and begged his sister's forgiveness. Then the vision vanished. Meanwhile, Yunvol told the wounded shadow that it was time to end things. The shadow wrapped its tentacles around Yunvol, but he broke free of the trap and struck his sword at the enemy. It disappeared immediately, unable to bear the fatal wounds. When Muha returned to his mistress, he found that she was barely conscious. She embraced Yunwol and said she didn't want him to disappear. She recognized herself as Sungakja, and giving her name, said that henceforth Yunwol was her Muha. She didn't understand her purpose yet, but she promised to figure it out and help him with his mission. Only that he would protect her from the shadows. After that, she lost consciousness, and Yunvol became transparent. He tried to touch her, but his hands went through her. The girl fainted in a very inappropriate place, on the grass near the park, but soon her friends came running to her and immediately took her to the hospital. Meanwhile, the wounded shadow went to the dark world, where she asked another monster to help her. This was the same archer that had attacked Haewon the night she awakened Yunwol. He destroyed that shadow, not wanting to help her, and said that she had gone to that Sungakja for nothing. Haewon was unconscious, but she was dreaming. In this dream, the scenery changed periodically, and soon she met Yunwol. He told her that she was now with her friends in the hospital, and also informed her that she had vaguely ordered him not to disappear, and to avoid wasting her energy, he had transported himself into her mind. As it turned out, to give orders to a muha, you have to give deliberate and clear orders, but Yunvol calmed the girl down and said that she would get used to it in time. The girl then recounted her vision. Yunvol replied that he had indeed had a younger sister, and he had once been human, but he did not remember becoming a muha, for his human life was much shorter than the life of a spirit, and he had slept in the confinement of a dagger for a very long time. Haewon noticed that at the mention of his sister, his face displayed guilt rather than the pain of separation. The young man said that his sister could not have become a muha like him, and then Haewon realized that he had many secrets. The young man then asked the girl how she was able to read his memories, since the Sungakja cannot read the minds of their flies. Haewon replied that she didn't know how it happened. The memories themselves flashed through her mind for a moment. The muha saw the red camellias around them, and remembered the blue-eyed brunette's words about how those flowers were a symbol that connected heaven and earth. And then he realized it all. Haewon was Shino. Haewon asked, "What did Shino mean?" A blizzard formed around them and covered the red camellias with snow. The young man asked the girl if she had ever been given those flowers. She couldn't remember it, and the panic inside the girl grew. Water began to drip from above, and steam began to emanate from Yunwol, from contact with it. He possessed the element of fire, and he was in no way allowed to touch the element of water. He left the girl's slumber, informing her that she would soon wake up on her own. When Haewon woke up, she saw her mom and a friend named Heeju in front of her. She apologized to her friend for making them miss the movie because of her, and then she saw Yunwol. He only appeared now, even though he had come out of sleep before her. She was still shocked by their conversation in the dream. Haewon decided to find any information about Shino herself, so as not to bother her muha. She doesn't know yet that in a week's time, she'll be trapped in a water trap that Yunwol won't be able to rescue her from. In the meantime, another school day awaited her. Her class had been given questionnaires to fill out consenting or refusing the school trip. The girl was desperate, for on any hike or outing she always had trouble with water, either drowning or catching a cold in the rain. She decided to leave that concern for later and went to the library to look for materials on Shino and Sungakja. There was nothing in the folklore section, and Haewon despaired when a blonde foreign boy came up to her and showed her a book on a printed sheet. The boy didn't speak Korean well, and he often inserted English phrases. At first, Haewon was wary. Why would the boy need a book in a language he didn't speak well, let alone read? She remembered that old woman in the park and was afraid it might have been a shadow pretending to be a human again, but soon calmed down. When she found the book, the boy wasn't around, so she decided to open it and see what it was about. Inside was a story called Tragedy of Shino. It said that Shino were beings that were different from humans and could see the whole truth in others, all of their past, and who they really were. Many people were afraid of the Shino because it was unbearable to know when someone was reading your mind. Eventually, people formed a conspiracy against Shino, which destroyed them, and the extermination of the seers began. The Sky Dwellers unleashed their grief and anger on the humans for killing the Shino, and endless floods and rains began. Then they froze the earth, and their anger destroyed half the people of the earth. Haewon flipped the page to see what happened next, but as it turned out, the page had been torn out. She decided to finish it at home, and went to check out a book in her name from the librarian. A boy was sitting in a tree watching through the window. His muha told him, calling him by his name Ronnie, that he had done a good job. That evening, his mom told Haewon that her father was returning to Korea and wanted to meet her. Haewon was not happy to meet her father, who had once told her as a child to never call him dad again. But still, she convinced her mom to be okay with the meeting. She was left alone in the room afterward, and then Yoonwol approached her. The girl told her mooch that if he could hear and see her even when he wasn't around, she wished he would keep his distance, as she wanted to have her secrets that no one could hear. After this conversation, Yoonwol went into the courtyard and remembered his past master, an elderly man with a sword in his hands, not a dagger. He had been very young then. The man told him that all those people he had killed would create a void in Yoonwol's soul, and told the boy to follow him. On the way, the old man told the young boy that a scabbard would be prepared for him, and warned him that a fateful creature would lead him to his death. That fateful creature was a brunette with blue eyes. Haewon opened her eyes. All of this was her dream. The next day, Haewon was on the bus with her friends discussing her assignments on the upcoming camping trip. At one point she wondered why then, in her dream, she was able to create red camellias so clearly if she had never gotten them. Suddenly, she remembered that her grandmother had given them to her as a child, and told her that she was an unusual child, but she shouldn't seek the truth without accepting herself. When Han Haewon remembered the conversation with her grandmother from her childhood, she felt someone's power trying to break into her mind and control her memory. Heju called out to her friend and asked her what she was thinking about again. She answered inarticulately, and in the evening she began to study the information about Shino again. The book borrowed from the library wasn't online, so the girl couldn't find out what was written on the torn-out pages. Haewon began to read the next pages. According to the legend of the ancient heavens, heaven and earth were different worlds. They created beings called humans. The man of heaven was born with the power to command all creatures, and the man of earth was born with the power to use all other creatures. But after that came a third species, the Shino. The Shino created a balance, so that other humans would not revel in power, and would not rebel. But after that, the book cut off again. After that, she went to bed. In her dream, she saw Yeonvol talking to a girl with black hair. He was asking her to go back to heaven and not to come down again, and she was telling him in her time that his actions were destined by fate and he was doing the right thing. Yoonvol's younger sister came running to them, and seeing him embracing this girl, screamed at him that because of him they were now doomed to die. Afterward, a mysterious man overtook her, and calling her filthy, shouted at her not to dare touch him. She regretted that she had trusted that girl, and she had taken from him the most precious thing of all, her brother. Haewon woke up abruptly, and saw Yoonwol in front of her. Yoonwol said, feeling her watching his memories. He had been trained to recognize Shino's magic as a child, from the very mysterious brunette he called his older sister. She was Shino, and through her influence, she had taught him to understand by inner sensation when others read his memories. He reassured his new mistress, and told her he would put up a barrier where she could no longer see his past. He then asked her if she knew what his sister had experienced before she died. Did she hate him? He hadn't seen her before the end, and he didn't know her emotions. Haevon didn't know them either. She sensed that there was bitterness, despair, and resentment in the girl towards that brunette. But what she felt for her brother, the girl didn't know. She lied to the muha that his little sister had no hatred for him. The next morning, she went camping with her friends on a tour bus. Upon arrival, the boys decided to go to a test of courage that the teachers at the school had set up. Haewon picked up a dagger and summoned Yunwol to be by her side for the test. Haewon went in pairs with a classmate named Ren. They had to collect the right items, and whoever came first would get the prize. The girl was very afraid of the dark forest, so her classmate took her by the hand. After a while, they came across a teacher in a ghost costume, an ordinary sheet. He gave them the item, and they moved on, searching for the rest of the keys. Ren said that it was foolish to fear ghosts. After all, they were just the souls of people who refused to be reborn and didn't want to move on. He had nothing but pity for such creatures. Aenval thought that this guy was a fool, and yet he was still thinking wisely. Even so, his aura seemed somewhat suspicious to him. Suddenly, an invisible hand appeared beside Haewon. It was a girl with black eyes. She took the girl's face in her palms and said that she had finally found the Sungakja. Ren asked her friend why she wasn't coming, and froze in place. Gaining physical embodiment, Aenval grabbed the shadow and put a sword to her throat. Ren pulled Haewon behind him, and Yu came out of the trance. She felt weakness in her body again, and realizing that it was Ijanvol who had started using her energy, she turned around. Behind her, the Battle of Muha V's shadow had begun. She told Ren to run out of here immediately and warn the others of the danger, and she stayed where she was. The shadow said she would not tolerate that this Sungakja already had a muha and would take it away to be a vessel for its master. Yunwol realized that this girl used to be a muha too, but had become a shadow for some reason, and was now looking for a new Sungakja for herself. Aenval told Haewon to leave, or she would interfere with the battle. She followed Ren, but her legs wouldn't hold her, so the guy put her on his back and asked her to tell everything, promising not to say anything to anyone. They were followed by a shadow that had been following the girl from the beginning. At some point, someone's transparent silhouette grabbed Haewon and dragged her towards the lake covered in mist. Ren started pulling her towards him and accidentally broke her wrist. Then the shadow decided to intervene and guided its black tentacles to the guy's throat and squeezed it. Then he finally let go of his friend. Meanwhile, Yunval was fighting against the shadow Muha. She couldn't put up her full strength and was afraid that her end was about to come. Then Aenval was about to deliver the fatal blow. He was stopped by the shadow of the guy who had recently strangled Ren. Aenval asked the guy what his name was, but the guy replied that it didn't matter because his Sungukja was in danger. The Muha didn't believe it at first, but eventually set out to save his mistress, for unnecessary delay could have cost her life. Shadow told the girl Muha that she had acted too rashly, and it was necessary first to find out whether Sungakja was near the Muha, and only then to attack. The girl felt guilty even though she just wanted to help her master. Haewon was dragged underwater the moment Aenval reached her. He couldn't touch the water as his element was fire. That's when a blonde-haired boy came to him and ordered his muha to get the girl out from under the water. Yuno jumped into the water. Haewon was dragged to the very bottom. She heard the man's voice in her head saying that he was looking for a Sungukja with Shino eyes who could save his muha. She saw a skeleton at the bottom and stopped beside it. Many years ago, there was a terrible drought. An elderly man buried his mother and told her he would soon follow her as he himself was slowly dying of dehydration. With his lame wife, who had been married to him since he was 16 and had taken care of his mother for all those decades, he set out to find the spring. They walked all day, but found no water. Then the wife saw a snake and looked in which direction it had crawled away. Just as she thought, the snake crawled to the pond. They approached the water and drank some from the palms of their hands. Then the man touched the sphere, a ball that lay under the water. The touch made his hand bleed, and then a girl with blue hair appeared before him. Calling herself a muha, she greeted him as her Sungakja and asked him his name. The muha girl, talking to the shadow, felt that her master had removed the barrier and let someone near her. Scared for him, she ran towards the lake. K1 continued to listen to the dead man's story. He said the muha had revealed many secrets to him, but his wife could not see it, only hear it, perhaps because they drank from the spring together. The muha commanded water. She gathered it from the ground, and every night she filled their water jugs so they could drink and tend to their crops. She also said that when the wizard's powers grew, they would be able to call for rain together, but it was still early. A local man overheard this dialogue and went to the ruler to inform him that a couple of old men could control water. There was vegetation in their garden, while there was a drought elsewhere, and they were discussing how to summon rain. The ruler told the informer to bring the old men, and if they couldn't make it rain, he would personally kill him. The wife made a dress for Gay, even though she didn't see her. The muha was very flattered and was happy to try it on when her master had enough strength for her to gain a physical body. The man told the girl that he would like to make it rain. He thought that the fact that in such dry times a muha appeared to command water from a Sungakja who cared about the people was a blessing. He slept a lot and ate well, so he believed he could last. The girl warned him that he could pass out before the first drop of water hit the ground, but the master insisted. Ronnie told Yunwal that his muha commanded the forest, and he would help her find Haewon under the water. The boy also said that he had been following the girl from the beginning. This made Yunwal angry, for this boy had just stood by and watched his mistress being dragged to the bottom, and only now decided to help. The informer heard that they planned to make it rain in 2 days, and reported it to the ruler. He put him in the dungeon and went to see what was going on himself. Gay did indeed call for rain, though her master had a hard time. He started coughing up blood. That was when their troubles began. The ruler saw Gay, who, at the moment of summoning the rain, took on a physical body for a moment. He decided to capture her so that he could enrich himself on the water with her. Several days passed. The man still felt ill, and so he lay down. His wife was busy sewing in the garden. Together with Gay, they went to check on him, but saw the men who had captured him. The woman rushed to defend her husband and started shouting at the gentleman not to dare touch the sick man. So they seized her, thinking that she would be more cooperative. But the woman did not tell them anything about the blue-haired girl who could make it rain. The ruler believed they were hiding her and wanted them to give away her location. To get the man to crack, the ruler stepped on his wife's sore foot, but even then the master said nothing. Then the lord ordered them locked in the dungeon and not fed until they could talk. Gay wept with regret that her master was being harmed because of her. She remembered her human life, in which she had also received beatings from her mistress as a slave. A long-standing resentment and rage was awakened in her, and she decided to take revenge on the greedy ruler for treating her son Gaksja in such a manner. Gay wanted to kill the man, but her master mentally forbade it. He said that he only had his gift to do good to people, and no matter how cruel they were, he would never use it to kill someone. In the dungeon, he said that when these people would look around and find no Gay, he would definitely let them go, and they would start their lives anew in a new place. So 4 days passed. All this time they had not eaten, and the servant told the lord that the old men had got supporters who were sure that if they died, that a new drought would begin in their lands. So the governor ordered that one of them who was still able to walk should be brought. They brought an old man, and the governor burned a red-hot brand to his eye to make him tell him the truth. But even after the torture, he remained silent. At that moment, one of the servants informed the lord that that old woman had passed away. He had just gone down to the cell and found that there were maggots in her leg. Apparently, the rotten blood had gotten to her heart, and she had died. The old man returned to the cell and, lifting his dead wife in his arms, began to cry. She was his whole meaning of life, and without her, he had lost all will. Gae prayed to the heavens to help her and her Sungakja, and then Chanien, the servant of heaven, came down to her. A man told Haewon that after his wife died, his muha was no longer the muha he had known before. Cheniing's appearance seemed familiar to the girl, but she couldn't remember where she had seen her before. At that moment, the branches of the tree grabbed her and began to pull her upwards. Haewon lashed out, but it was no use, and soon she found herself on the surface of the lake. It was only at that moment that she realized how long she had been at the bottom, and yet she could breathe underwater. She saw Ronnie and recognized him as the boy from the library. While they argued about polite behavior in Korea, Yoonwol set her mistress's broken bone, and she bent for a moment in pain. Then she told of the one she had met at the bottom, but she didn't learn the whole story until the end. Gae caught up with them, and then Haewon said she wanted to help her and her Sungakja, which was at the bottom of the lake. Gae refused to help, and Haewon foolishly said she was Shino. Shinin, watching everything through the water surface, smirked at the girl's stupidity. Ayunval covered Haewon with himself and said that calling herself Shino in front of the enemy was a stupid dare. Gae remembered that in her lifetime, when she had killed several people, Shino had appeared to her and decided to turn her into a muha. She was enraged that now the one who administered justice had reappeared in front of her and wanted to kill her. Yoonwol summoned flames from the ground and surrounded Gae with them. Yuno and Ronnie were amazed at the power of this muha. Yoonwol himself told Gae to give up, as he was many times stronger than her. The only reason he held back was because his Sungakja wanted to help her, and she had to accept her help. At that moment, a shadow came to them, to the aid of a muha. Yuno said that she had never seen a shadow that was stronger than this one. The shadow apologized to Yoonwol for interfering. Yoonwol grabbed Haewon and ran off with her into the distance. Yoonwol covered them with tree branches and told the shadow that she was a tree muha, and this entire forest was at her disposal. Haewon told Yoonwol that she could breathe underwater, and it was as if something had gotten inside her, so she should go back. Best of all, she didn't feel that weakness like before, even though Yoonwol was in a physical body. When she was around Ren, she really felt bad, but after she had been underwater, all the weakness disappeared. At that moment, Gae and the shadow created a hole in the ground that Haewon fell through, and said that they wouldn't touch her if she didn't dare to meddle in their affairs. She was in great pain, and it felt as if her ribs were breaking. Yoonwol tried to pull her out, but it was as if the girl was being pulled into the abyss. So she turned to the dead Sungakja and said that if she died now, his muha would not be able to help her, and she was sure that the clue was in the past. Ren came out from behind the trees and pounced on Gae. At that moment, because she was distracted, the vortex closed and Haewon was able to get out of the trap. At first she thought it was Sungakja magic, but afterwards she saw her classmate. She yelled at him to stay out of it and not risk his life. That's when Gae asked the guy, "Is he really sick of living?"